Um, Start now, but okay, yeah. Do you maybe mind? You want to just give an overview of what your app is and kind of what you've done so far?
Sure. Yeah, so our app is called Banter Lab. And just a very quick description. I was a newsletter writer, and my newsletter was kind of more like for entertainment. And it was more kind of like a fun entertainment vibe. And so I started including polls in my newsletter. And it was polls not for like getting feedback. It was more just like fun polls, like, you know, favorite movies and just like kind of questions that anybody might have an opinion on. And I found that they were pretty useful because my click rates and my engagement rates were, I think, a lot higher than other typical newsletters that were similar to mine. And the tools out there for embedding polls in a newsletter are not great, and they're kind of like a lot of the tools are geared more towards like getting feedback or
Yeah.
customer reviews or things like that. And so I thought, basically there could be, I think there's a place for a tool that is a poll building tool that is specifically made for content creators. And it would be polls that are kind of more fun in nature. Like you could build like a tournament style bracket, like for example, if you wrote a newsletter about book recommendations, you could build like a tournament style bracket where your audience can click and rank and like fill out their bracket and see what other audience members see what they filled out their bracket as and compare and share with friends and family. So that's kind of the idea. Um, yeah, and then I can jump into my questions now, or if we want to take a pause there.
Yeah, sure. So it's more sort of interest-based um, polls. Yeah, because I use Beehive for my newsletter, and I think the main option is just kind of like text polls that are, yeah, generally um, feedback based, where I don't believe there's a way for other people to see the results or share.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah, and so yeah, so it'd be like that. There's a lot of different types of those that are like really basic multiple choice, and so our tool would be more kind of polls is almost like not the right word for it. It's more like these interactive graphics, like a tournament style bracket, or it could be like if you've ever seen these graphics. Usually, it's like sports accounts that post them, where it's like rank your top five all-time NBA players and like a drag and drop ranking, or you
oh,
could
okay,
do
yeah.
build your lineup and you have a budget and you have to pick your different players. So those type of things. Yeah.
Sort of survey as well, like little bit of
Yeah.
features of survey too.
Yeah. Survey or like it's kind of in the arena of like polls, surveys, quizzes, like things like that. So
And it looks like one of your big pitches is not just creating and sharing, not just creating the polls, but uh, building an audience with them, as in creating a poll and making them super easy to share so that other people can share them with their network. And it seems like sort of the value pitch, aside from having fun, is like growing your audience and creating, like spreading the word.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's kind of our main focus in terms of what we're trying to build everything around is, making these as useful as possible for somebody who's trying to build an audience and like engage with their current audience. And also, these are going to be graphics and they're going to be kind of, we're going to design them nicely so that they can be posted on all different kinds of platforms. So Twitter, you can use the same graphic image there of like a bracket, and you can post it all over the place. And so kind of spreading the reach of your content and engaging with your audience and then ultimately growing your audience.
Okay. And then one more thing, just so I can fully picture it. So when you say graphics, is it more sort of templates, or like, because I picture like a bracket, I think of it more sort of as a template, but um, like on your website, you have um, some examples where there's like movies and there's like the thumbnails sort of the movie. So like, are those predefined, or is it more like here's sort of the framework for your poll and you can generate the actual content?
Yeah, exactly. So it's more like templates, and then people can, for whatever their content may be, they can go in and populate the different labels and pictures, and so they build their own graphics,
Yeah.
and then on top of that, there's the actual voting and results functionality. So you'll be able to, instead of like right now, everywhere you see those type of things on the internet, they're just static images. But we're actually making them where the audience members can vote on them, and you can see the general public's votes and see the actual results. So it's kind of a more just a more fun way to use those polls and graphics and content.
Okay, cool. So let's get into your questions.
Sure. So it was with that background, like, um, I used them for my newsletter, and I got some results, and I think it was enough to be an interesting idea. And so I kind of went down the path of trying to validate the idea. And I talked with a lot of other indie hackers and other developers working on projects like this, and then also talked to a lot of customers or potential customers that write newsletters in the kind of entertainment area. And I think I got enough validation to, at least to for it to be interesting. And I think with the nature of kind of the claims we're making in our marketing about like this tool will help you grow your audience. At this point, I can't really say that 100% for sure because, it did increase engagement in my newsletter. But I've been going back and forth with the issue of like, it's a decent effort to build the MVP because there's a decent amount of functionality to build with voting and the back end and storing all the results you know um, and so I just kind of feel like I'm to the point where I've done enough kind of soft validation, I guess, with talking to people, and I just feel like I can't reach the next level of validation until I really just fully build the MVP and let people try it and actually look at their metrics before and after. Like, did this really increase your engagement? And so I've kind of been in the pickle of like, you know, just like, I guess I wanted to get your take on are there just certain projects that inherently you have to really build it almost all the way to like test it out and to actually get validation on the idea?
Yeah, it's a good question. I kind of view the validation. I mean, I think validation can happen a lot of different ways depending on the project. I kind of view it as in three sort of common buckets, and the first being talking to people and asking the right questions and getting as much feedback as you can. Ultimately, well, there is a real art to that, right? There's like, I don't know if you've read the book, The Mom Test, but that very well much outlines the difference in how to ask good questions and how to ask bad questions. If you're sort of saying, "Hey, here's my idea. What do you think about it?" Like, your people are going to say yes because they're going to be nice, and you don't really know what that means. So, but if you ask the right kind of questions without, you know, forcing your idea upon someone, that's going to be better. Of course, you still don't really know if they're going to pull out their card or if they're going to use it, if it's a free tool even or what. Um, the next sort of easy step without building too much is putting up a landing page and trying to drive people to it, and either having a wait list to people capture email or a buy now button or a registration page or a pre-sale, none of which really does anything except tells you that someone is trying to buy it, right? So that's another way to um, sort of validate it and swipe a card if that's what you're gonna. Are you trying to charge for this? Is your plan to charge for this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, eventually
So
it'll be a monthly subscription.
I mean that's one way. And then and then I think that's a pretty good way because right, people are pulling out their card. But beyond that, to find out if people are going to use it, yeah, I mean you have to build some version of it. And so then the art is how do I build as little as possible where we find out if people can use it. And so with this, or is your um I guess I'm curious how you're defining your MVP. Is it sort of everything you have in mind as far as like, okay, you can create a poll and it's going to be interactive where it's going to be able to, you're going to be able to see the results, and you're going to be able to share it to all your network, and everyone's going to be able to see everything and all of these things? Or have you taken a sort of a slice of it to see like just enough?
Yeah, yeah, it's we have like broken it down to the minimum that we think is like feasible to actually kind of live up to the claims we're making on our landing page, basically. And so it is, you can build the polls, sharing, and then voting and results, and then the ability for the person who created the poll to create a profile so they can feature like their newsletter sign up and feature their other content. And so those kind of things I think are, we really couldn't test the idea and get like actual metrics without at least those things, which it is a decent amount. Like it's, you know, it's not like a something you can just throw together in a weekend. It's like probably 2 to 3 months maybe of effort. So it's small enough to where it's not like you're spending 3 years on this thing, but yeah, it's kind of been, I think we've broken it down at least as much as possible to at least test the idea and get some real world feedback.
So, in one sentence, what's the value proposition of the tool?
To increase engagement in your content and spread the reach of your content across platforms.
Right. So that already is two things. And in my mind, there's three, and maybe one isn't really your value prop, but one is just like have a fun and engaging thing to put in your content. So like before anyone could even share it or maybe even see the results, they can engage with it. So that's one value prop that would be a smaller build. Then the next one is drive and increase engagement in your content. So that there's the fun part, and then there's actually like getting more clicks. In the case of a newsletter, clicks in your content, and then there's the sharing piece of like growing, spreading the word, and growing your audience. What would happen? Do you feel like if you don't do all three, then you're not getting the full validation of what you need? I mean, obviously, we all start with like this big grand idea of what we're trying to do, and I'm always trying to boil it down to like, what's the one thing? What's the one thing we do super duper well? And I can see how the value of all of these things would be awesome. How would you feel if you were like the sharing part is not yet?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I have thought a lot about that. And I think the thing that has driven me to where I'm at now and what I think we need to build is if we just started with what you described first with uh, let's say we forget about all the voting and results and we just provide these templates where people can build these cool looking graphics and include them in their newsletter. Um, I think the thing about that is that it would totally change who we want to market to and totally change kind of our messaging around it. And I guess so that was what kind of made me want to build at least a couple other features were that would allow it to still tailor to, you know, audience growth and content creators. Because I think like I guess I just thought like the whole message would have to change if all we're doing is just building a simple like graphic generator. It'd be like, I don't know. I guess in my mind I want it to be a little bit more ambitious than that, than just
Mm.
kind of like a simple like image generator type thing. But it is good feedback though. Like I definitely I think that was my thought process though. It's just it would totally change the message of our marketing and totally change like kind of what we're trying to accomplish with building the tool. But yeah, I don't know. Curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, there's also other factors, right? Like, are you building this? Do you have a, are you paying people to build it? Is this costing you money to build? Um,
Yeah, and that's yeah, definitely a big factor. I started building it myself as actually like as kind of a project to teach myself how to code. Um, and it was just going so slow, and I really liked the idea and wanted to make it happen. So I'm working with I have two developers that are working with me, or I'm not paying them. We're all just kind of co-founders together. So they liked the idea enough that we're all working on it together. So yeah, definitely not like I would definitely have a different attitude if I was like investing, thousands of dollars into building the idea. And yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you're thinking what, a couple more months? How long do you think it would take?
Yeah, there's been a decent amount of progress so far. I think we'll probably realistically we'll get to launch because it's all a side project for all of us. No one's really full time on it. I think realistically we'll get to launch probably in maybe 3 months or so from now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it gets into the territory of like having to trust your gut and do what you're comfortable with. I mean, I constantly find myself suggesting to people like don't build unless you have done as much research and stuff as possible. It doesn't. I'm currently building something that I have hardly talked to anyone about because I feel like I have my reasons. So there's always exceptions to the rules, and there's always reasons. Um, I mean, the next place my mind goes, if you feel pretty convinced that you need to have the sharing features, is would just be probably beyond the scope of this conversation, but diving into like what is the most simple way you can um, implement a sharing feature to live up to your messaging, be able to have that messaging and that targeting and live up to it. And also, there are ways to kind of let people know that things are coming soon after that, that things will get better and better.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just a matter of, do you really need eight ways for people to share? Do they need to be able to share it on every social media platform? Do they need to be able to have logins or whatever, all these extra things? I would
Yeah.
just try to start hacking away if you can't convince yourself that maybe you don't even need that stuff in the first
Yeah. Yeah.
place.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think we're getting into the phase now where we're going to take a hard look at like, at a more detailed level of what really we need to build in terms of that like sharing functionality and stuff. So yeah, I think hopefully we're yeah, definitely on the same page in terms of wanting to shave it back as much as possible to make it as simple as possible, at least at the
Mhm.
start.
Yeah. Okay. And your next question.
Okay. And so somewhat related. So the first kind of target customer that we're looking at are newsletter writers that write a newsletter that is kind of in an entertainment area. So it could be sports or movies and TV or pop culture, anything like that. Um, I felt like that was pretty small target base to go after. And we've tossed around the idea of maybe just picking one of those, like just going after sports newsletter writers. And then getting there, I guess I was kind of starting to feel like I don't know, maybe this is too small because how that's getting really niche and like we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves into just that and it's going to be tougher to find a lot that actually want to test it out. So just in general, kind of curious your thoughts on that that initial phase of like defining your target customer base when you're at the MVP phase.
Yeah. Uh, I always think of the niching down. I mean, ultimately, there are a number of reasons why we can do this and why we do this. Sometimes it's to differentiate from competitors and other things. Early on, to me, the main thing is um, the more specific I can be, and this might sound dumb, but like the easier it is to know who I'm going to go reach out to, because it might be like, oh, it might feel like, oh, I'm going to target every newsletter creator. That's easy. I just go blast them all. Well, I find that when I go sit down to actually do that, I'm like, where do I start? If I know I'm going to target people who create sports related newsletter, that's a lot easier. And then my messaging becomes significantly easier. Even if I'm manually writing these messages at first, like even if it's manual outreach and not automated cold emails or whatever, it's easier for me to sort of have a template and get the right words for this audience and things like that. Um, and and then of course, when those people read that messaging, it speaks to them much more than dear newsletter creator. Well, who's that? I mean, that's so. Uh, I would almost, well, I would almost err on starting too small because you can always broaden it. It's much easier to broaden it than to not get anyone to respond because no one knows who you're talking to because your messaging is too generic. Um, and I mean, almost to the point of like, this is a little extreme, but like almost to the point of like, I'm going to create this for this one person, and then I'm going to make it work for 10 people, and then I'm going to make it work for 100. And so I'm looking at the categories you're talking about: sports, gaming, pop culture. They can easily be put under the same umbrella, right? Like as you pick one, add another in your outreach, and then you can change the messaging to entertainment. It's much easier than if you're reaching out to like sports newsletter creators and legal newsletter creators or whatever. Um, so, and the other thing, so I mean, I guess I would err on starting small and not being afraid of starting small because you can easily update your website messaging to encompass more. And the other thing would be for the way I like to do this kind of thing is like you probably already have a list of categories as far as newsletter niches. Uh, Maybe pick 10 that all sound good and then just start going out. I don't know what your outreach plan is beyond the maybe some people that you already talked to, but it always is helpful to me to go and start actually actively messaging those people because sometimes it feels a lot easier than it feels like it's going to be a lot easier than it actually is. I can be like, oh, I'm just going to go to Twitter and search for people that like sports and whatever. And you start to do it, and you're like, actually, this is harder than I thought. Like this is hard. So by creating a list of 10 that sound good, and then picking three that I like the most, and then going and just starting to message those people early on. And right now, it doesn't have to be a ton of them, but it can be some, and just try to say, hey, I'm working on this thing. Would you, when I'm ready, would you be able to talk to me, or are you ready to talk to me now, or whatever, and just to see if you can get any responses. Um, because I've also tried things where I had one target audience in mind, and then as soon as I start to go sit down to message them, I'm like, oh, like this is, I don't know how to talk to these people or find them in the first place like I thought I did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely err on too small. And I did look at your site, and uh, to be honest, it did take me a little bit to like it. I would like to see the messaging be, like speak. I know you're not talking directly to me on your messaging, but like I'd like the reader to know like this is for me, like faster. So I think it would help. And you know, early on, you're going to be if you take that approach of I'm going to go after sports newsletter writers, your messaging on your site can be sports newsletter writers because you're probably not going to be getting, I mean, I don't know, maybe unless you're getting a ton of SEO traffic elsewhere already or something, then that's a little different. But assuming it's like a pretty fresh website without a ton of traffic and the main people that are going to be going to it are people you're reaching out to, it's not going to hurt you to have it pretty targeted.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense. Yeah. That's really helpful feedback. Yeah. Especially like, I like the idea of just making it for one person because if there's one person doing something, especially in the newsletter, like there's many, many newsletters. If you're making something for one newsletter writer, then it's probably going to apply to a lot more.
And you'll know if that person is really unique, right? And like, oh, like, because you don't want to build for someone who's got like a one-off thing that no one, you'll know. And also the same, like I do the same for writing a cold email or any messaging or the website. It's just like I like picture someone, oh, this person, I'm gonna write this to them, like I'm writing a personal message to them. And then it's always it's a lot better.
Yeah, thanks. All right. And then my final question. So, just for a couple different reasons, honestly, more just like it doesn't, none of the people that are in our group of founders are big, like social media people. We don't post that much. I have like 120 followers on Twitter or something. And I just, to be honest, I just don't like being on social media all the time, just like the general quality of life. So for a lot of different reasons, we've kind of decided not to like spend a bunch of time audience building before we launch this thing. And I feel pretty comfortable with that decision. And I think like, we're going to post interesting things when they come up and hopefully get some interest with the following that we do have. But just was curious your thoughts on like the importance or necessity of audience building for a tool like this.
Well, I guess my first question would be, what do you plan to do once this thing's ready to go? How do you plan to get it in front of people?
Yeah, so a lot of I think cold outreach is really going to be the main tactic, and then doing some posting on different websites like where newsletter writers hang out, like Facebook groups. We already kind of have a big whole Notion page where we've found a bunch of groups, and we have a big giant list of newsletter writers that we're planning to reach out to once we're kind of ready. And we also need to revamp our landing page before I really want to do that. So I would say cold outreach is the main tactic, and then just posting articles and blog posts in different areas that reference, that have a reference to our landing page, like Reddit and Indie Hackers and a few other places like that.
Okay. Yeah. So I I'm the same as you. I was the same as you, and my I wasn't active on social media until like within the last year. And I built a product up to 60K MRR or 61 with no audience. And I'm actually now doing the reverse and sort of building an audience off of that story, off of that success. So it can happen either way very much. And I always say, I always think of it as like, if social media and being on there is your strength and you're on there anyway and you love it, great. You should utilize that. And if not, I don't think you should force it. I do think it can be a great way to build an audience, but I by no means think it's the only way. So if it's not your cup of tea and it's going to be a struggle for you and you're not going to enjoy it and you have better ways, then I wouldn't worry about it at all.
Yeah.
Um, and at the same time, I feel like with the nature of your product, the sort of one of the things about your product is it's about creating virality or trying to create, sharing. And so I'm sure there are ways that you could use your tool on its own I would think you could come up with some pretty cool campaigns you could do around like with the tool itself, sort of creating some sort of um, polls or surveys that are relevant to what you're doing. I don't know, I have to think about it more, but kind of being able to use that to generate leads on its own. And then there's
Yeah.
all kinds of other things you could do too, right? Like I could see creating some lead magnets. Like the thing about like creating a lead magnet where you say it's on Twitter and you put a tweet up that says, I created this guide on how to grow your audience faster from this type of newsletter, retweet and comment and DM me and I'll send it to you. Like that kind of thing can do well even for someone that doesn't have a big audience on Twitter or whatever the platform is. And those things aren't terribly hard to create. And I could very much see you being able to create some valuable little PDFs or guides or tools or whatever for that type of audience that could do well. So I don't have a lot of concern that you can find some good ways to get in front of these people. And if you're not all about social media, then I wouldn't bother.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm hopeful with this, at least I'm hopeful that it can do some of the marketing on its own. Because, if we get a newsletter writer that has 5,000 subscribers and they use our poll and it looks cool and it's in the middle of their newsletter that week, that's 5,000 people that are seeing it, maybe
And you
clicking
have
on
your
it.
little You'll have your logo in there probably, right? Or a name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And the voting is going to take place on our site, so it'll basically direct them right to our site. So
Yeah. I mean, and that's a common great way to have, you know, you have a free plan that still has your branding in it, and then a paid plan that removes it and custom domain and things like that, which probably already thought of. But yeah, it's a great way to get drive eyeballs on there.
yeah,
So
yeah. Thanks. Yeah, that's all. That's all really helpful. Appreciate it.
cool. Of course.